All right, Rylan, you can let me know whenever. All right. Welcome back, Raw Thoughts listeners. I wanted to welcome you to another week, another episode, another person that we get to kind of dive in and talk about their lives and what they do and where they're going with it. If you follow me on Instagram, you knew that I put out a big announcement earlier this week. So, actually, correction, it was last week. Raw Thoughts Podcast is sponsoring Columbia High School football team. Yes, Columbia High School football team. We are sponsoring it. So what that looks like, August 26th is their first home game. It's actually their first game of the season. And the teens are actually going to be helping me out raise money for teen suicide prevention. The following day, on August 27th, the podcast is sponsoring the Canyon County Paramedics Golf Tournament for Teen Golf for Teens. The teens from the football team will be raising the money. So if you are at that game, I would love for you to make sure you have cash. If you got a check, you can donate. And then they will actually be sharing those funds or sharing their experience with the funds and giving it to the Canyon County Paramedics for 2C Succeed and first aid, mental health first aid. So what that does is helping teachers and bus drivers and coaches and peer support that are involved with these teens actually know how to help when a situation arises and how we can help the teens with prevention. So definitely check out the Instagram at rawthoughts.podcast and you will see any other announcements coming up. You can reach out to me if you would like a sponsorship, and let's get into it. So this week, I would love to introduce to you Melanie from Baby Bonds, and tell us about yourself.
You bet. So I have been here in Boise for about 6 years. We moved from Portland. We were there for many, many years. I'm a mother of 6, including twins.
Wow.
And have 3 grandbabies. I was a stay-at-home mom for many, many years. And as soon as my first went to school, I decided that I really wanted to do something because I had been taking care of little people for so many years. And all of a sudden I was bored. So I decided to be a postpartum doula and did that for several years. And then kind of that led me to the lactation world and been doing that for several years and have really enjoyed that. In growing up, my dad was an OBGYN, and so sometimes I would even get to go see him deliver babies, which was super cool if the moms would let me, and I happened to be in the car when he got a call. And so I always have had like a passion to work with moms and babies, and also just my whole motherhood, I definitely struggled with, especially when my twins were born, with some postpartum depression, and it was pretty significant. And so it kind of has been what has kind of pushed me forward in trying to help moms and babies to be more successful, both with breastfeeding and just having happier relationship, and hopefully help those moms try to avoid the anxiety and depression that comes when things are struggling.
Yeah. Tell us about your experience with postpartum depression in your twins.
Yeah, it was pretty tough. I at the time, I don't even know if I knew that I had it, which was pretty crazy. I remember trying to talk myself out of anxious thoughts and things like that. It was really, really tough. And I was just so exhausted. I had a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and newborn twins. So
wow.
If that doesn't put you into depression, I don't know what will, right? Chronic stress, no doubt. And just lack of sleep. And it was just a really, really tough time. My husband had just finished graduate work, we had just bought a house. So we were kind of house poor. So we couldn't really afford to hire out, help.
Right.
And it was really, really tough. I remember calling my dad because he was a OBGYN and family practitioner, and just, telling him that I was struggling. And he's like, well, maybe you need some thyroid medicine. So we tried that. And of course that didn't help. And back then it was kind of taboo to talk about postpartum depression. It was kind of like hush hush, and you just kind of suffered in silence, which I'm really grateful that we're seeing that come forward, and that practitioners are asking moms how they're doing. Moms are more willing to talk about it. It's not this shameful thing that I felt it was for me. And So I didn't get counseling. I didn't get put on medication. I just kind of suffered through it. And it was tough. It was not good and it was not fun.
Wow.
So luckily I had a very supportive husband, which that was probably my only saving grace, truthfully. I did have one of my mom's dear friends that would show up and sometimes bring meals or come help clean and whatnot. But, it was just a really, really hard time. And truthfully, I don't remember a ton about it because I was so exhausted.
Yeah, I bet. And how many, so you have 6 kids?
I have 6 children. Yeah. So I did have one more after that, believe it or not.
Yeah. And did you experience it again with that other one?
I did, but not to the level. None of my kids did I have it to the level that I did with my twins. In fact, having that singleton afterwards felt like a piece of cake, except that the twins were 3, which was tough too.
And tell us, tell us a little bit more to involve the moms of what that can look like, with postpartum depression.
Right. So what we do know is that chronic stress leads to anxiety, chronic anxiety leads to depression. And so what happens with these poor mamas, especially if breastfeeding's not going well and they're feeding their babies for, so many times in the middle of the night and not getting their sleep, is that their body goes into stress mode, and that release of cortisol then puts you into this anxious mode because you feel like you can never have you're just never relaxed. Everything's stressful. And when you have that chronically, you start to get depressed, like this is my new life and I don't like it. It's tough. And so a lot of these moms will, they'll cry a lot. They'll just be super stressed. They often don't want to talk about it, although more are doing that lately. They sometimes have really anxious thoughts. They don't, they're not reasonable. Sometimes they'll say things that I'm thinking to myself, oh, there's another mama with anxious, something's going on because doesn't make sense. Some of the things that they think and say. So, they're often like, you look at them and they have kind of a flat look about them. They just they're not a lot of expression because they are so maxed out.
Right. And that's especially for listeners, if somebody has just had a baby, things to look out for.
Absolutely.
That can be, is there kind of a time frame? Is it kind of right after it happens? Does it happen months down the road? Is everybody a little bit different?
Anywhere along the way. Absolutely. So really any time in that first year can be considered postpartum. So, we see it usually probably starting to happen in that first month if it's going to happen, but we can see it all along depending on how things are going.
Wow. And it's hard because you want it to be enjoyable, right?
Exactly.
You just had a
That's
baby.
the thing that's so sad is that they're wanting to enjoy their baby and they're just so struggling. So,
And so tell us a little bit also about being a doula.
Yeah. So as a postpartum doula, for the most part, I enjoyed it. The main reason why I kind of, steered towards lactation, I felt compelled to do it for whatever reason. And when I looked into what it required to become a lactation consultant, I was really overwhelmed and almost didn't do it, but I'm glad I did. But the postpartum doula work is basically a mom for the mom. So you are there to support and help with light housework, other children, visiting with the mom. You can make meals, do errands, let mom sleep, change the baby, things like that, so that mom can enjoy her baby more is the main goal of what a postpartum doula does.
Okay. And how common is that?
Here in Boise, we don't have a lot of them. And I think partly it's that, a lot of people can't afford it. I feel like in Portland, it was a huge thing when I was there. And I just don't think that we have several that I know of, but it's not something that we see a lot of moms utilize just because of the cost. We'd see a lot of birth doulas, of course, but as far as postpartum, the work, I don't know that there's a ton of need for it. If there's a need, ton of people that choose to use it. They use their many other ways.
Yeah. I had no idea that wasn't even a thing.
It is. Yeah.
It's great. See, this is why we bring people on here and we learn more and more.
Absolutely.
It is interesting because you do hear a lot about birth doulas and being in that, kind of encompass. And I think we've seen that a lot more and more, just kind of some people steering away from Western medicine or want a different route or want a different experience or wanting to do it at home.
Right.
What is your experience with birth doulas?
So I never had a birth doula. I didn't know that there was even a thing when I had my kids, but that was, 28. My youngest is 18 and leaving the nest, by the way, this Friday. I'm
Oh,
okay. It's
are
all
you
good.
sure you're
I
okay?
am okay. I am totally okay. He's been self-sufficient for a few years, so it'll be good for him to get out on his own. But so we as far as birth doulas, I didn't even know it was a thing. So that's how I got into this realm, was when I was actually at a park one day with my son when he was young, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, and met a birth doula, and I was like, oh, that sounds like something I would really like to do. But then I thought about it. I'm like, I can't do that. I've got 6 kids. There's no way
Yeah.
I've got time to just like
Pick
leave
up
on
and
a
leave.
whim. Yeah. So, but then in learning about birth doula, I learned about postpartum doulas, and I'm like, oh, I can do that. I could get scheduled to do that. So that's how I kind of got into this.
That's very nice. And then you said, the requirements for the lactation specialist. What are those requirements?
So, to become an international board certified lactation consultant, because there's lots of different levels of lactation. You can be a certified lactation educator. You can be a certified lactation counselor. But the international board certified is like the gold standard. And most people, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years to finish that. So it's basically like a master's degree. If you aren't a nurse, you do need to do all of the pre-nursing prerequisites that you would take in college. And then you do 90 hours of lactation-specific education. And then in addition to that, you do 500 to 1,000 clinical hours. And then you sit for the international board exam. So, and you have to pass that. So
Wow.
it's tough. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and really important, I think, to be working with an IBCLC versus others. For most things, it is important to have that to make sure that they're in scope.
Yeah. And how old were your kids when you decided that that's what you wanted to go and do?
So this would have been probably about 7 years ago. So going back in the, so my oldest would have been 20 and my youngest would have been about 10.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And was it hard with 6 kids and you going to school?
Yes and no, because they were all in school full time, so I was able to do that while they were in school, and it worked out fine. Actually, I mean, it was a busy time for sure, but it was doable.
It was doable. It was manageable because they're old enough. They're sufficient enough. I mean, even 10-year-olds, they're doing their own thing.
For sure. And I think, some moms will try to do this while their kids are young, and it often takes them longer than that amount of time. But because my kids were in school, it was easier.
Gotcha. And what is it that you actually do?
That's a good question. So we do a lot of things. I have chosen to specialize specifically in tongue tie. Some individuals, you can do, there's different areas of specialty that people choose to do. As we're learning more about tongue tie, we find that that tends to be the problem when people are having breastfeeding issues, almost always, really, in my experience. So if we have a mom with pain or a baby that's failure to thrive, mom's milk's drying up, frustration at the breast, what else? Clicking, gulping, gassy, fussy, colic, reflux. All of those things tend to be tied to tongue tie. And if we leave it untreated, it can lead to a lot of other problems going down the road, from anything from scoliosis to digestive problems, speech issues, cavities, orthodontia issues, migraines, TMJ, acid reflux, and on and on and on. So
what exactly is tongue tie?
Yeah, so under our tongue we have this little connective tissue. It's called the frenulum. And if that is restricted, it can affect the tongue's ability to move appropriately. So for these babies, some of them are able to come up with compensations to still feed. If mom has an oversupply, a good letdown, some of these babies can actually still gain appropriately, which is why a lot of times they're missed. But if mom doesn't have a good supply, or baby can't figure things out and doesn't come up with the compensations, then we often get those failure to thrive really struggling to gain, or we'll see that they gain appropriately in those first few months. And then when mom's milk transitions from hormonally driven to supply and demand, we'll see that babe starts to not gain appropriately. So they kind of tank. They'll come and then they'll just kind of putter out on their gain. So those are some things to kind of watch for.
Okay. And what is it that you guys do to help
Mhm.
with this?
Yeah. So what I do as an IBCLC, we're not allowed to it's not in our scope to diagnose tongue tie, but what I do is to assess for things that we see that would be considered tongue tie symptoms, function, and anatomy. And then I just chart that. And then if parents are open to tongue tie release, then we take them to the provider of their choice. And then we have them do the laser or scissor or whatever technique they've chosen to release that frenulum and get that tongue functioning optimally. And then I do a lot of follow-up too with these families post-procedure. So I do the wound management, making sure that that's not closing in on itself. So we teach the parents how to do the stretches. I'm also trained in a lot of body work, so infant massage, craniosacral, rhythmic movement, suck training. I'm going for craniofacial training in October. So we do a ton of body work on these babes, and I teach the parents the body work so that they can be working on the babe daily, since they can't afford time-wise or money-wise to come see me every day. And that really helps, because when we have that tight midline fascia, then it restricts the baby's ability to move. And so then we have the compensations that come in, misalignment, tight muscles. So that body work in turn helps these babies to feel better, move better, eat better, sleep better.
Yeah. How is it that this tiny little thing underneath our tongue can
Isn't that crazy?
control so much?
Yeah. So, and really it's truthfully more so, I believe, the fascia that's at the base of the tongue, but we have to get through that frenulum in order to release the fascia. So right here at our base of our tongue, we have some fascia that runs all the way through our entire body to our toes. And if it's restricted as we grow, we start to see with some of these babies torticollis, where the neck starts to crank, or we see curvature of the spine. So we see like a banana baby sideways. Whenever we're seeing babies that are starting to curve, that's almost inevitably a missed tongue tie, and that fascia is pulling the body and not allowing it to grow straight.
So what if it gets missed, and then they're in their older years and kind of having that, maybe their speech is delayed or something else is coming up, coming from that.
Yeah, and we see that a lot. In fact, I would say inevitably almost every family that I work with, a subsequent child, as soon as they learn about this, they go, oh, that's what's wrong with my 3-year-old. And what do we do now? Because it's almost impossible to treat a 3-year-old. We only really do treatment of that age if they're choking on their foods or having severe sleep apnea. Otherwise, we kind of wait until they're a little older, because it doesn't make sense to do the risk of putting them under anesthesia to do a simple procedure, unless they're having things that are life-threatening happening.
Okay. And that's it's so interesting.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Did any of your kids have it?
So I think all of my kids had it. And actually, most of my kids have been released as adults. In fact, my one daughter's getting released this Thursday. She had a partial release with another provider. We thought it was full at the time, but it wasn't, now that I know what I know. And so she's getting a release this Thursday. So we've been doing all the body work with her in preparation, craniosacral. We've done myofascial release, orofacial myology. We've been doing PT, chiropractic, massage, all the things to get her prepped. Because if you do a release when you're older, the more body work you do before and after, the more successful your release will be, so that your body doesn't hold what it's been doing wrong all those years.
Right. And what were her symptoms that she's now doing it as an adult?
Yeah, so her main symptoms are she just has severe TMJ, so really tight, painful jaw. She grinds her teeth at night. She's definitely got some airway issues that are happening, which we often see with ties. So when the tongue's tethered to the floor of your mouth, it's not resting on the upper palate where it's supposed to. So those individuals are more prone to snore, to have sleep apnea, to grind their teeth. So, and hers has gotten bad enough that it's affecting, it's causing major pain for her. So we're hoping that this will be the trick for her to help get rid of that.
Wow. And how old is she?
She's 26.
Wow. So this can even be, happening as an adult.
Yeah. So I was released at 43 years old. And my story is pretty crazy, because everyone that I went to told me I wasn't tied. And I had learned about tongue tie being, through my lactation training and with my mentor that was very tongue tie savvy. And I was like, I know I'm tied. I have all of those symptoms as an adult. I have acid reflux. I have migraines. I have food intolerances. I have scoliosis. I have TMJ. I have, what else did I have? Sleep apnea. And I didn't even know it, but I had speech issues too. So if I was nervous or cold, my tongue would kind of catch and do weird, funny things. And I'd be like, that was weird. And I don't do that anymore now that I've been released.
Wow.
So at 43, I found a provider, Dr. Gahary. He's out in Portland. He's one of the leading ENTs in the world. He actually goes all over the world and teaches. And he's who did my release and my son's release the same day. And we walked out of there feeling like, I say marionettes, because we were so relaxed. Our bodies just felt like we had this weight tremendously lifted off of us. And my acid reflux, I've never had a problem since.
Wow.
My migraines, I think I've only had 4 in 8 years. I used to have probably up to 4 a month. My scoliosis is almost gone. I used to have a Dowager's hump. I don't know if you know what those are, that little weird bump on your neck. That's gone. The only thing that it hasn't fixed for me is my sleep apnea. And that's because my palate's too narrow for my tongue, and I've ground down too much of my teeth. So there's not really a place for my tongue to float up to. So we're still working on that. I've got a mouthpiece coming in a couple weeks. But my son, his was even more life-changing. So he was 11 at the time. His scoliosis was severe. He also had been dealing with ulcers for years. And some years in school, he would miss 30 to 40 days of class because he was in so much pain. And we couldn't figure out what to do. We kept putting him on antacids on and off. The ulcers would come back. He'd be in pain again, so we'd go to the doctor again. And no one had answers for us. So we did the release, and he has not had a single stomach issue since. And his scoliosis is completely gone.
Wow.
So you just can't dispute it. Like, I know what I have seen in my family, and I see this weekly with the babies that I work with. We see these babies that are super cranky. In fact, today we did a release on a baby that was screaming yesterday when I went to visit them. We did the release today, and after the release, even though she was a little sad from the procedure, she completely melted. Her whole body was a different, just relaxed, and she fell asleep immediately. So it is life-changing for these families. We see colic babies go completely happy within a few days post-procedure because they're no longer swallowing air. They're no longer spitting up and causing that inflammation and erosion in their esophagus. And with these families too, I often will notice, back to the postpartum depression thing, is these moms, when they first come to see me, they're glazed over, they're tired, they're stressed, they're sad, they often break down and cry. They usually come in hair and makeup not done. And then I see them a few weeks later post-procedure, and I sometimes don't recognize them because they come in all done up. They're happy. They're a different person because they're getting their sleep and their baby's not screaming at them all day.
Yeah, they're actually feeling like what they're doing, providing for their child, is actually working.
Right.
Instead of it just screaming all the time.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
It is. It is really interesting. And I wish that we could get more pediatricians on board. We do have some in town that have, we've gone and we've educated about this, and they refer to us often, but for whatever reason, some of the other pediatricians just aren't on board. And the only thing that we can figure is that for many generations, a lot of pediatricians have been doing partial releases, which does not fix the problem, which is why we think there's controversy about whether or not to do releases. So it is important that if you do decide to do a release, that you go to a provider that knows what they're doing, that they hopefully even do the fascial release, because that's the game changer in avoiding reattachment and also seeing better results with the symptoms resolving.
So how would they know if the doctor's only going to do a partial? Like what entails for the partial?
Yeah, so a lot of providers, and we still see this, pediatricians doing this mainly with scissor, where they'll go in and they'll just release the frenulum that's visible and noticeable, and they're not getting into the base of the tongue where we need to get that fascia. We need to have a diamond-shaped wound under the tongue, and we need to do stretches afterwards to keep it from readhering. So if you don't have a diamond-shaped wound and you're not told to do stretches, then you didn't get a full release, because we're still seeing lots of peds just clipping, and it usually doesn't fix the problem.
Right. And I've heard of that a lot, right? And I think a lot of people that go to their pediatricians probably think that that's,
Right.
going to be fixing it.
Right.
But
And then they're confused why they still have symptoms afterwards, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I know a family that I believe she was 3 or 4, and they did end up doing it because it was her speech a lot. That was, and they did the stretches and they did a lot of things, but it did still reattach.
Oh, darn it.
Yeah. So this is I'll be sending this to her afterwards.
Well, and the 3 or 4-year-olds is really difficult to do the stretches on because they have teeth and they don't understand why we're doing that. And usually at that age, if we are going to do something like that, we actually encourage them to do stitches and do it under anesthesia. So that way it won't readhere down on itself. It'll heal upwards. So.
Wow. That is, this is interesting. I don't even have kids, and I'm like, oh, maybe I have it. I'm like, I've got back issues.
Do ya?
I don't have, I've had migraines, but our family has had migraines for years. And I do know, I believe it was one of my twin nephews that had a tongue tie that they
really?
did have to release. But it's so interesting you talking about some providers being totally game for it and others being a little bit more standoffish to it.
Right.
What kind of trainings do you provide them?
So I've done lunch and learns, and I'm happy to do that. If anyone has a pediatrician that wants to learn more, or any area in the birth community, midwives, doulas, anyone that would be helping these moms and babies, I'm more than happy to come and do a lunch and learn. I bring lunch and I do a little PowerPoint presentation and educate them on the importance of really helping these moms and babies by treating these ties.
Yeah. And what are the stretches? What is kind of the aftercare? You've talked about the stretches, but what is that doing? What is that helping?
Yeah, so we have like a diamond-shaped wound. Usually it's about this big.
Wow.
You guys can see that. And what our goal is to elongate and help that diamond to be this way versus closing in on itself this way, right? So we do just go in and we stretch that wound up and move that tongue back towards the tonsils. And that helps to keep that from readhering. And we do that a few times a day for 6 weeks.
Wow. And is it you actually going into these homes?
So we teach the parents how to do it the day of the procedure, and then we have them do it. And then I do 3 follow-ups, usually post-procedure. So we check the wound, we do weighted feeds, make sure baby's gaining appropriately, make sure the latch is good, make sure mom's milk is still doing well. And so those are kind of the main. And then body work. We always do body work on the babies if time permits.
And I feel like not only the tongue tie, but just you have the attachment, for the babies. And then you have, the mom's milk supply. What are some things that if mom's milk isn't coming that you would be able to kind of consult them on? Or
absolutely.
if they're having trouble with the attachment, what is some of those things?
Yeah. So with milk supply, the most important thing is milk removal. So a lot of people think, I get tea lactation cookies, that will help. Well, it supports breast milk if you're, if you need more calories, or there's certain foods that are that might help support breast milk, such as brewer's yeast, flaxseed, chia. There's herbals, lots of herbals that people take that might increase prolactin or help build more milk-making tissue. But the most important thing is milk removal. So we want to make sure they have a good pump. So we can talk a little bit about that if you want me to.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Insurances will pay for a pump for almost everyone. There are a few that somehow figure out a way to get out of that thing that they're supposed to be doing. But the best pump that insurances pay for, the most tried and true, in my opinion, is the Spectra. We have a lot of other options that usually are not as optimal for whatever reason. A lot of moms like to get the in-bra pumps. The problem with those is they usually are not very effective, especially if you don't have the right flange. So it's super important to see someone and get measured appropriately. Almost no one is the size that they come with, which drives me a little crazy. So, most people can fit in those, but it means that it's too big for most. And so what happens is it doesn't stimulate the breast appropriately, so we're not removing milk enough. And then your body goes, guess we didn't need that because it got left in here, and so it makes less and less. So it's super important that we have a drainage of the breast if we want to increase our supply. And a lot of times with these tied babies, they're not doing that, which is why moms struggle with their supply. So yeah, so then the other thing as far as helping with latch, a lot of moms are doing the wrong hold on their tissue. We definitely help with positioning. A lot of babies are kind of sprawled sideways like this, where we want them to be more tummy to tummy and kind of bullseye onto the breast, reaching up a little bit versus curled in. So there's a lot of things that we can do to help open the airway and have a more effective breastfeeding relationship for sure.
This is so interesting, having not ever had kids. I mean, I've had my sisters. I mean, they've breastfed. You know, I've had the twins were in the NICU. I mean, I've been around so much of these things, but I think not having my own children, I'm like, wow, I did not realize that I could be so intense of having the baby, like you said, like belly to belly and nose up and all these different things. How are moms truly learning this?
So I think, hopefully they're getting some good support in the hospital. Hopefully I feel like we're seeing more and more moms breastfeeding in public, which I think helps normalize and helps other future moms know how to breastfeed. You would think it's supernatural, and sometimes it is, but more times than not, it needs some support of some kind to help mom and baby figure it out. And it's a breastfeeding dance. And really, even moms that have breastfed before often find subsequent babies that struggle because that baby needs extra support, whatever it may be. And more times than not, when they are struggling, it's because that darn little frenulum.
Wow.
So
it always comes back to that. You're like, everything is.
Yeah,
That's the problem.
Truthfully, when I got into lactation, I thought it was going to be like all rainbows and lollipops. Like, it's going to be so fun working with moms and babies. And then when I learned about tongue tie and got into tongue tie, I'm like, oh my heck, this is crazy how many of these struggling breastfeeding dyads have this. And had I known it, I might have chosen something else. Not because, I love helping moms and babies, but it's a stressful thing for sure. Like, it's hard for these moms to make the decision of, whether or not to do the release. It's hard to see the baby sad. But what's most beautiful about it is seeing them transition and do so much better and thrive.
Right. Well, and that's hard for you to, even going and consulting, having the babies cry, having multiple babies cry a day, and even though you haven't had your kids, that young for a long time, it's like you also are just a giving heart and want to help. And that when they're just crying for different reasons, and then you got to reason with the mom of, why they need to do that or educating them. That's a lot on you.
It is. It's a stressful job for sure. It is very taxing. And one thing that I've done to kind of help myself with this is I've started doing a lot more self-care now that my kids are older and I have time to do that. And that helps me to make it through better, just because you're giving a lot of yourself, and you're dealing with people that are very stressed.
I can even imagine your patience with not only the babies, but the moms too. And
there are definitely days. It's hard.
What are some of the self-care things that you're doing for yourself?
So I love to get massages. I have been getting my nails done for the first time in a long time. So that's been kind of fun. What else? I've had craniosacral therapy myself.
What is that? You keep talking about.
So craniosacral therapy is a very, very light modality. Anyone can do it because you can't really injure someone doing it. It is basically you're following the rhythm of the central nervous system to help calm the central nervous system, help heal from trauma, release tension. So it's a very kind of hard to explain, but the training, usually people get it through what's called Epledger, although there are other people that are training for that. And it's a wonderful technique. You can't dispute it when you watch a baby being treated with it, how they just basically will melt into your arms and just be relaxed.
Is it like cool. A tapping? Are they massaging your head?
No, so it's kind of just me following the rhythm of what the body is doing. So basically, I feel like the best way to explain it is it's telling the baby or adult, if you have it as an adult, that you're heard. But it just somehow calms that central nervous system. We can even put them into what's called a still point, where we hold usually we do that at the legs, or we just follow that rhythm, which your nerves are in constant movement in and out. And when you come in and you bring it back in and hold it, it keeps that central nervous system and puts it into a little rest point, basically, and kind of just tells the brain to take a little cat nap.
Yeah.
And so it helps to just reset is probably the best way to say.
So who does it for you?
So I see Dominique Tardif. She is amazing. In fact, I believe she's the only certified CST in the whole state of Idaho, which it's very difficult to become fully certified. Like, you have to take so many classes and sit for an exam and treat one of the people at the top. So most people don't get to that level. And she does a great job. She's down in downtown Boise here.
Okay. And how often do you go and do that?
So I haven't done CST for myself for a while. I personally prefer massage or chiropractic or, other things. But ideally you're probably going at least a few times a year, if not more often.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it makes sense, right? We're calming it, you're going with the rhythm, but then, like you said, you're kind of making it pause where it's like, okay, we're with you, we see you, we hear you, we feel you. We're pausing you for a second, and then it's like, kind of reset.
Right. It's really cool. Really. Yeah. And I think the best, because it is such a interesting modality, like a lot of times parents will be like, what are you doing? How are they so calm? And, I try to explain it the way I explained to you. But the best way to really appreciate it and understand it is to be treated yourself, because then you become a firm believer in it, because you just leave so relaxed, and it is pretty amazing.
That's awesome. That's super cool. And then is there any types of massages that are your favorite?
Well, I like deep tissue for sure. I did go to, I can't remember the place, but I went over off of Overland, and I had went to a place where they walk on you. And that feels really good too.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm just kind of, trying out different places. And I started doing Pilates lately. That's kind of my new thing. And I am signing up as of tomorrow for unlimited, because I've loved it. I just did for a month, and I feel like it's really helping me feel better, move better, get stronger. And so I'm going to start doing that 3 or 4 times a week. So
that's
I'm really excited about that too.
That's really cool. And that's, helping you overall, with your health and decompressing and being able to, take the stress off as well, with, and just preventing a lot of health issues too.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So tell us about your kids.
So my oldest daughter is 28. She has my 3 grandbabies, and she's a wedding photographer. They're in the process right now of trying to find a home. They're actually in Lehi, Utah. They had this feeling they were supposed to sell their home, so they did, and now they're looking for a home. They just, my little first grandbaby just started private school today. She's going to a little place where they have uniforms and everything. So that's super cute. She's super excited to start there. They felt compelled to get her into that school, and so they did, and everything's just kind of fallen into place. So that's exciting. So she does weddings mainly in Utah, but she flies all over. She just did one in California last week. So she does mainly high-end weddings. She's a pretty awesome photographer.
Wow.
It's BriannaWhite.com if anyone wants to look there up.
Yeah.
And then my next daughter is Emily, and she is actually living with us this summer. She's 26, doing a nursing traveler contract. Her husband had a internship out in Texas this year, and she wasn't able to get a job out there, so she decided to live with the parentals.
Wow.
And it's been kind of fun to have her. She's just delightful to have around, and she starts this next week her nursing practitioner school in Vanderbilt.
Wow.
So she's excited. She's going to do women's health and help those mamas too. So
you're going to have a whole family. Dad can deliver. You can do the postpartum. She can be involved with that as well.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
That's kind of cool. And then my next son is Nathan. He's at Brigham Young University studying to be a marriage and family counselor. He's 24, single, and looking for someone. He will kill me for saying that, so I won't tell him about the podcast.
Moms always are the ones trying to throw us out there.
I know. And then I have my twins. They're 21. So one of my twins actually just got married this year, and he is also at Brigham University, and he is studying to be an attorney. My next son, his twin brother, is actually on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints out in Florida.
Wow.
And he gets home in December and then hopefully gets into BYU. He was at BYU-I, and he was actually another kind of cool story about him. So he was my ADHD child. We almost lost him at birth.
Wow.
And something kind of weird happened around age 2-ish. We don't know what, if it was immunizations, if it was just birth trauma that came forward or whatever, but he just kind of stopped talking. We thought he was autistic. Then they said no. We thought he was Asperger's. They said no. We finally, about, I think, age probably 6, got a diagnosis of ADHD. And he struggled. I mean, he was my only kid that was not my 4.0 student. And he was in special needs classes and was socially awkward and did crazy weird things where we're like, what were you thinking? And he's like, well, my brain told me to do that. And we're like, but did you think that that's a good idea? And he just didn't process stuff. He would do really, really bizarre stuff. Well, about age 17, we did a tongue tie release on him. And I swear he has gotten better and better every year. I'm not even kidding. More normal, more social. Ended up going to BYU-I for 3 semesters, 4.0, 4.0, 3.95. Like, it was like, what the heck happened? Whereas all his other years in school, it was always just a challenge to get him to do his homework, and struggled and never had 4.0s. So the only thing I can figure is that his tongue tie release helped him sleep better and or heal his gut health, because he is a different person.
Wow.
So anyway, he applied for BYU since he got good enough grades. So we're hoping we'll have all 4 of my boys down there. My 18-year-old, that's who we're taking down to BYU this Friday.
Wow.
So that all of my kids will be in Utah. So
are they, when they're down there, are they living together? Are they all different?
they're all in different places, but they get together often. They do
Okay.
enjoy each other's company.
Good.
So, yeah.
Good. That is important. I mean,
Yeah.
some siblings have a fun dynamic where they, probably would see each other. And then there's other siblings that are like, nope, it's my time. I want to experience this. I want to live a little bit, and go from there. I actually just got back from a sister's getaway in Salt Lake.
Fun.
And it's amazing how many people are like, I've never gone on a trip with my sister, or I've never gone on a siblings, outing. And it's so fun.
Yes.
It is so fun. I mean, they're the only ones. I mean, we were joking about things that we did as kids, and, then making more memories. And they both have, children, and it's nice to just have your sisters.
Yes. Yep.
And with them, my oldest sister, she, her first kid she had, I was 13. So I became an aunt at 13.
Wow.
And it's fun to, we were at a young age. So I feel like my sisters got taken away from me a little bit from my nieces and nephews, but I love them all. But it's fun as adults where you can still come back together, and
Absolutely.
it's just you guys. It's not because of, the kids or the family members. It's just your siblings.
Yeah. I turned 50 this year, and I couldn't figure out, I knew that who I wanted to spend it with, which was my sisters and my daughters, but I couldn't figure out what to do. We ended up just going up to Heber in Utah, and we had, we went to dinner to nice places, and we did yoga, and we hung out, and we had someone come in and do massage, and it was just a nice getaway. So
it's that quality time that you have with them that is, I think, probably my love language for sure.
Oh, for sure. And so there's nothing better than sisters. I always say everyone can live without a brother, but no one can live without a sister.
No.
You need a sister.
It
really is. There's nothing more special, for sure.
Yeah, we definitely always have each other's back.
Yes.
Sometimes that's good. Sometimes we're like, all right, where are we going today? With that. Well, I mean, I love so much knowledge coming from you. Where do you think, do you think you would change out of lactation?
No, I think I'm here to stay. I do, for the most part, I do love it. There are definitely times when I am so busy that it feels overwhelming, and I don't have as much time as I want to take care of myself, but I'm really trying hard to not overschedule myself so that I have time to take care for myself. It still means that I'm working full time, but it's not 7 to 7, that's too much.
Right.
And so, sometimes I'll refer out, sometimes I will schedule them out further so that I'm more working my schedule out a little bit better instead of stacking them way late into the evening. So I'm trying to be better about that, so I'm not overdoing myself, because I do think that you can become burned out in
Yeah.
this field.
Yeah. And I think that comes to any field,
For sure,
or any
for
person
sure, absolutely,
of
absolutely.
being,
Yeah.
you can love your job and you can love what you do, but overdoing it can really lead to that burnout, and overstacking you. And,
Right.
I think society says, oh, you got to be working all the time and you got to be doing these things. And if you're, having fun, then you're wasting time in your business, or you're not making money. And it's like, no, you need
to have a work-life balance.
There
for
has
sure.
to be a balance in
family
there.
time and everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Within that. And I had a question for you, but that just literally escaped my mind. That hasn't happened very often.
That's okay. We all have that happen.
That is what Raw Thoughts is sometimes they just escape your brain within there. I know what it was. So with you working, is it just your own business? Do you work underneath a doctor? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I have my own clinic, and it's over off of Emerald, kind of by Boise Town Center Mall, back behind Target. So it's only me in there, but I share a waiting room with a amazing PT. Her name's Shelly Oakley with Renee Physical Therapy, and I refer some of my babies to her. And then I work directly with Dr. Zink mainly most of the time. I do have another provider that I refer to. Her name's Shannon Gardner, who's an ENT PA. And Dr. Zink is the one that does diode laser, which is my preference for release. And then Shannon uses scissor. So
okay. And what's the benefits, or why would someone go over the laser versus the scissors?
So I feel like the laser, especially the diode, is the safest tool that we have for an infant, because it's a contact-only laser and it only cauterizes tissue you touch. And if baby moves, you just take your foot off the pedal and it stops working. So I feel like it's super safe. It's super slow going. So we can go layer by layer to really remove that connective tissue. And I just feel there's very little bleeding, which is fantastic. Whereas with scissor, there's quite a bit of bleeding. So it can take quite a bit of time afterwards to slow the bleeding. So that's why it's for sure my preference.
And why would somebody go over the scissors versus the laser?
Financial. So Dr. Zink is private pay only. And then we have Shannon, who takes all insurances for medical. So
very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How fun.
Yeah.
How fun. Well, how do people get a hold of you?
So my website is babybonds.us. And I have, a contact form on there. If people want to be seen, the best way is to just get on my new client page and follow all the directions there. They can actually schedule themselves. There's an intake form that they fill out. I do take a lot of insurances. I work with a company called Lactation Network. And they have contracted with Blue Cross, Anthem, Regents, Blue Cross of Idaho, Cigna, or if mom or babe is on Medicaid and then mom or babe is on one of the other insurances, so they don't both have to be on one of the insurances they work with, they often approve those too. And if they are approved, and the link is on my website, the new client page, then they have 6 visits with me at 100% coverage.
Wow.
So no deductible, no copay, nothing. So if you have coverage, then use it. It's so important. And then my private pay clients, I feel like I'm pretty affordable for most people. I mean, sometimes it's not. And I do home visits. I do virtual. I mainly do clinic visits. I'd say 98% of my clients come to me just because I charge quite a bit for travel for home. And it's ideal to be in person versus virtual.
Right.
That's mainly it.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming onto the podcast.
I appreciate you asking me.
Yeah, and sharing more. We just had another person talk about postpartum, and it's great to just hear a couple different, sides of it and what you can look for. And sounds like, it's a very relevant thing.
Oh, for sure.
Especially with those mamas and babies. So if anybody would like to reach out to her, definitely do so. And I would love to hear your experience. You can also find all of her information in the description of the podcast. So definitely just scroll down. You'll have all of her information there for reaching out to her. And like I said, thank you again for coming on the podcast. And listeners, we will see you next week for another one.
Bye. Bye.
Awesome.